So I think I need to preface it with it's largely a God story, right? Like these things all happened in spite of me, not because of me. And I think I'd be remiss not to point out just how John and Karen took me in. And they really removed a lot of the barriers that a kid who barely had a high school education, was full of energy, and was broke as a joke had, right? And started with simple things like providing clothes that were appropriate for the business world and teaching me how to talk in a way that was presentable in front of decision makers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of In The Ellipsis. I'm Jeremiah Isley, your host. Just a quick reminder before we get things started, the show is powered by Crooked Path Productions. Oh, look, it's up behind me. We help people make podcasts and we help people share their stories and their passions through the form of podcasting. So if you are interested in that in any way, you can always reach out. All the contact info is in the show notes. I'm on all the socials at Jeremiah Isley. You can find me there and follow me like in the cool social media way, not like the stalker way. Let's dive into today with my, I don't even know how long I've known you, dude, like forever. It seems like you could call yeah, right. You could call today the Isley and Nisly show. Joining me today is Kevin Nisly. I'll let you introduce we'll start with the bookends, where you were, where you are now, because I think you have too many things going on for me to even recall from the list that I have in front of me.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. So I'm pretty high energy, and pretty high ADHD, I think, never officially diagnosed, but lots of rabbit trails. But where to start probably starts in high school, kind of like working at McDonald's, paying my own way to go to a private school, a Christian school, and getting engaged my senior year in high school. I looked this morning just out of curiosity back at like my Social Security earnings and realized the year I got engaged, I made $2,800, and then graduated high school in 97 and immediately got married to Carol and started working construction, doing carpentry things. And that's, I started out, you said the bookends. I think I started out wondering like, how am I going to provide for a family? And, how do I do this as a high school graduate who really didn't care much about school? I was in it for social reasons and, being forced. Obviously, I was voluntold to go to school, wondering how God was going to provide and use me to be the provider for a family. And where we're at now, 28 years later, man, God has made me the steward of several small businesses that are thriving, and I love it. I get to have interesting circles of influence. I get to go to work daily doing things that I absolutely love, and
Nice.
And life is good.
Nice. That's so cool. A lot of times I talk to business owners or whatever, and there's always that, like, I'm doing what I love. I don't know that I've met a person yet that's been like, you know what? I started a business doing something I absolutely hate. And, maybe there are people out there that do that, but it seems like there's sort of like a quality of life thing of like starting a business of something that sort of like gives you that energy, that gives you that like inspiration to get up every day and keep going. So let's talk about how you got into business. You're running businesses now. Obviously you said you started doing like carpentry and things like that. Like what twists and turns pulled you along? Let's get into this story of going from there to where you are now.
So I think I need to preface it with it's largely a God story, right? Like these things all happened in spite of me, not because of me. And it was a journey of faith. And so I want to just preface, like, I'm not telling the story with a pat on my own back. I'm giving glory to God through this.
Sure.
So I got engaged our senior year and was working construction, fell and got really, really hurt. Almost died, the whole thing. And we were sitting at the dinner table, was just getting ready to propose to my now wife, and my dad and I were talking about like So what do you do? Like, do you keep on going back to work with the risk of getting hurt? But it was the only way I knew how to make money.
Yeah.
And he said, well, what would you think about calling John Lyle? And you know John Lyle
Yep.
from back in our early community of believers days. He was my
Yeah.
Sunday school teacher. And I always knew him as the guy that owned a business, that gave out candy bars to people,
Right.
and was just like, he had the good life. And I hadn't talked to him for quite a few years, but I called him and he remembered me. And I said, hey, look, I'm just looking for a job. And John brought me into his company. It was Award Fundraising based in the Akron area. And he and Karen basically took a young kid. I was 19. The first time we talked, he wanted to hire me right away, but apparently his business insurance company didn't like the idea of hiring a 19-year-old kid who had their license suspended multiple times for reckless driving and speeding and those sorts of things. So I had to wait a year, which was quite a test for somebody with zero patience. I went back to working construction, got married in 97, and then started working for Award Fundraising in 98. And I think I'd be remiss not to point out just how John and Karen took me in. And they really removed a lot of the barriers that a kid who barely had a high school education, was full of energy, and was broke as a joke had, right? And started with simple things like providing clothes that were appropriate for the business world and teaching me how to talk in a way that was presentable in front of decision makers. How not to be the loudest person in the room, and, just all those sorts of things. And then helped with things beyond just the physical or the material thing, but took me in and started teaching me just how to treat people and how to have a relationship with God and those kind of things, and really invested in me. And that probably was one of the more pivotal things in my life that set me on a trajectory for where I am now. And through that, I became a salesperson and was good at it. I loved what I did. And a few years into it, so I started in 98. In 2004, I went to my boss and I was like, hey, I feel like I would like to start getting into some real estate stuff. Like, what would you think? Like, would you feel that my interests are divided? And he's like, Kevin, you have way too much energy to do just one job. He's like, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'm thinking about like buying some buildings in Akron and starting to become a landlord. And he goes, let's go look at them. So we did. And the first one we looked at was rough. It was $12,500 in a very rough area. I had been abandoned for years. And he said, well, how are you going to buy this? And I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, how much do you need? And I said, well, it's $12,000 and I don't have $12,000. And he said, well, how about we start out with that? And he wrote me a check right then and there. And I bought my first building. And through a wild series of events back then, I was able to just take that and build on it, and started buying properties and learning business. And what it was is, here's a 24-year-old kid who didn't understand amortization, interest rates, the loan systems, business accounting. I mean, nothing.
Wow.
And I just started going to anybody that owned properties with a steno pad, because we didn't have iPhones back in 2004,
Right.
or at least I didn't, and buying beers and coffee for anybody that would talk to me, and started taking notes and learning business in general. Am I going too slow for the podcast, Jeremiah? Are we doing okay?
No, this is gold, man. This is great. So you're doing real estate. Are you still doing real estate? Is that something that's part of your several businesses that you're doing, or has that something that phased out? And if that's so, like what went into that decision to move on from that?
So, great question. I did it for 15 years.
Okay.
It's still part of what I do, but I sold all the properties that I had in the Akron area during COVID, actually right the week before COVID, and used that to invest into a property for all the businesses to come together into one physical location. I did a 1031 exchange and kicked my taxes down the road for a little ways, and was able to get into a nice property here in Alliance. But that's jumping a little bit ahead.
Sure.
So if I can go back to where I was at Award Fundraising, doing well and enjoying what I did. And John ended up getting cancer at an early age and just passed away. And collectively, his brothers and son-in-law and I worked together to kind of manage the day-to-day stuff of the business. And after a few years, the business went to the son-in-law. And it was at that point I decided that I was going to move on. So I left. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever done, because I really had found a niche. I found a place where I could be successful. I loved what I did.
Yeah.
I made good money. At this point, we had 4 kids. I was the sole provider. And, my income was based on my ability to sell and to be at award fundraising. And so leaving was a very challenging thing. And God just kind of put me into sales with internet and SEO things. And I didn't quite understand why he was moving me into this stuff, but I did it and did it to the best of my ability. And met some pretty incredible people that are now part of the things that I do. But that wasn't the end of the story with fundraising. About 5 years later, John's wife, Karen, called me just out of the blue and said, "Hey, would you ever think about getting back into fundraising?" And I was like, I don't think so. That ship has sailed. And she said, "Well, the business has, not been handled well and it's for sale. Would you think about buying it?" And I decided out of respect for Karen that I would entertain the idea, but I really had not a lot of interest in it. And, looked at a bunch of financing options and thought I had it worked out a couple of times, spent a couple of months going over the books. This is a 34-year-old company at the time. There was lots of data and a lot of, just a lot to process. And it was in a pretty bad state of disrepair at this point. Ended up going to one of the suppliers after my financing fell through that I had never met and said, "Hey," his name was Rich Myers. And I said, "Hey, you don't know me. My name's Kevin. I used to work for this company. I know that you've done a lot of business with them. I was thinking about buying it. My financing fell through, but I have a couple of old customers that, would potentially run some fundraisers with me. If I had a supplier, would you do that?" And for time's sake, I'll keep it short. But basically, he met me and on a handshake, bought the business for me, loaned me the money, and set me on a trajectory of starting my own business. So in 2015, I went from the best paying job I'd ever had working in sales with SEO and websites and feeling like, I was doing well, to stopping all of that and starting a business that was very broken. So what I bought with not my money was an old forklift, an old website, some QuickBooks files, and an 800 number. And started from scratch, basically. I had to rebrand the company, give it a new name. I had to change the way that everything worked. I had to move the company and had to reestablish relationships with all the suppliers that had been severed and with all the customers. And that was largely through help. My best friend, Ryan Klingelhofer, and his family really helped me with giving me a place and really putting their foot in my rear end to be excited about this and take the risk and try it. And I took a huge risk, and I told you that I went back to my Social Security earnings this morning just out of curiosity. And I went from making the most money I'd ever made in my life to making $27,000 my first year. And it was a wild ride, but God provided along the way everything we needed. And 10 years later, in June, it'll be 10 years later, we've got a thriving company that is doing well, and it's affording me the privilege of venturing out and starting some new things and using it to springboard some other ideas that I've had. And it's been a pretty exciting ride along the way.
Hey everyone, Jeremiah Isley here, your host of In The Ellipsis, with a quick reminder that we are powered by Crooked Path Productions. At Crooked Path Productions, we help people make podcasts. And right now, we're giving away all of our secrets. If you go to fasttrack.crookedpathmedia.com, you can download our full Fast Track podcast guide, including our pre-production, our production checklist, our post-production checklist, a full gear guide, and a content planner framework. It's literally like all of our secrets for creating a great sounding, great looking, world-class podcast. So if you want to check that out and you want to get your own podcast underway, you can head on over there and get that, again, completely free, no strings attached. All right, that's enough of that. Let's get back to the show. That's awesome. So let's talk about some of those other things. I know there's a coffee roaster happening right now. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about other ventures that have sort of blossomed out of, and it's really cool to think like you took a big risk and obviously made sacrifices along the way. of that security of like, I've got a great 9 to 5, I've got the day job's in place, making good money, but there was obviously something else in store for you. And I mean, one, we could go back to that moment and talk about like the fear and the anxiety and the faith that it takes to like step into that. And then also, like what has become, you look back 10 years and you go, oh, well, that's why.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, in the moment, making that decision was super challenging. I remember distinctly there was a point where I had basically called together the people that were most influential in my life and put them all in a room. And my buddy Ryan and I had gone through all the numbers from the business and put it together in the most dissectable way possible, and
Sure.
kind of presented our case. Like, here's the status of the company. Here's what we think potential is, and just kind of laid it out. And I went around the room, one person at a time, and said, what do you think I should do? And I remember specifically praying that each person would say, don't do it, because I was so scared. And I remember going around the room and resoundingly, everyone goes, I think you should do it. And I remember this almost sickening feeling in my stomach of like, I'm going to walk away from a sure thing and risk everything.
Yeah.
And that was very pivotal. I think, now in retrospect, I look back and like, part of the reason that I left the fundraising company when I did originally was because, I felt like I was working towards a small share of ownership by, working with the family and putting in extra things behind the scenes. And when I realized that wasn't going to happen, I think part of why I left was like, hey, I want to work for something that I can be a part owner of. And got up there laughing, going, okay, you're leaving because your feelings are hurt. And the reason I'm moving you out is because eventually I'm going to make you 100% owner of this thing.
Yeah.
And, and everything else is just the ride in between, the steps of faith and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. Yeah. I love that the picture of you just praying that everybody says, dude, no. And the opposite happens, because that's how it is. Actually, it's funny because, my company, it's named Crooked Path Productions. It comes from the Ecclesiastes, which says, hey, consider what God's done. Who can make straight what he's made crooked? And like, our path is like that. We think it's A to B when it's, it zigzags all over the place. And we wish we knew what that next step was, but we don't always get to make that decision.
You're 100% right. And I think that segues into kind of some of the spinoffs or ventures that I'm doing. The most connectable one is the coffee roasting thing. And that started probably about 3 years ago, where all of a sudden in her 40s, my wife started drinking coffee. And I've always drank coffee, but not probably been a connoisseur, just enjoy it. And she started drinking it, and she didn't like how she felt on different coffees. And then she wanted to do research. She's into health and the ingredients of things and all that stuff. And she didn't like not feeling like she had a real transparent window into what was going into some of the coffee and whether there was chemicals or not chemicals, preservatives or not, and just felt like there could be a healthier way to do it. And so she reached out to my uncle Merle, he's a missionary way up in Canada, and he's roasted coffee for years. And just said, how did you start? And basically he said, a $20 popcorn roaster from Amazon and some raw beans from this website, and put the two things together and make the green things hot, and they come out brown, and then you drink it. And he gave a little bit more helpful advice than that. But in summary, my wife bought everything and just put it on my desk and said, please start roasting coffee. And so I did, just for her, and didn't really understand any of the science behind it or anything. And over the next 3 years, really just gave myself a YouTube education. And again, going to people who knew more than me and trying to be a sponge and absorb their knowledge, and just sort of transferred from a $20 popcorn roaster to, a little thing that I bought on Amazon for $200 that made real small amounts. And I made my own coffee roaster out of some thermocouples and a popcorn popper and a grill in my grill outside and a shop vac to cool it. And I started roasting, and gave some to family members, and people started to enjoy it. And so eventually I had, still have the picture somewhere, but it was a half a pound of mostly burnt coffee that I had roasted. I just put on Facebook and I said, hey, does anybody want to buy some coffee? And it sold in a second. And I went,
Yeah.
hmm. So then some other people just started messaging me and saying, hey, can I get some of that coffee? And so I started roasting for people that were friends with me on Facebook.
Sure.
And I remember one day my friend Mike Lane stopped in to pick up his coffee that he had bought that I had roasted on my grill. And he goes, what's your plans? And I go, I don't have any. I enjoy roasting coffee. I said, I'm not trying to make $1 million. He goes, well, why not? And I went, I don't know. And so I started really thinking about it. And I go, well, I'm in a position where the biggest obstacles for starting a coffee roastery are things like a building, logistics, inventory systems, packing facilities, shipping capabilities, staff, labeling, just all those things in place because of my fundraising company, Diamond Fundraising. Yeah. And I was like, I could just try it. So we invested in a very small commercial roaster, about $3,500 investment. And I started working 2 jobs. I would do fundraising and then I would change clothes and go roast. And it has been another wild ride where I don't know the outcome, but I know that I love the trajectory. I love the momentum it's gaining. Last summer, we ended up investing in some significant equipment that makes the process a lot easier. And I'm hiring my daughter Reese, who works almost full-time for me now, and we call her the bagger of all beans. She just puts things in beans and labels things and keeps inventory straight, and I roast, and it's growing. We do ship to home, so people buy online and we ship it directly to people's houses, so subscription based. We do roast to order. You pick your beans, you pick how you want it ground, you pick how you want it roasted, you pick what origin you want it from, and then we ship it anywhere in the US. We do wholesale accounts. We work with cafes, coffee shops, restaurants, churches, and provide large amounts of coffee for them. But we do it all with cleanliness and purity at heart. We can't use that word organic because of certain steps that you have to follow to get that stamp. But we don't. We roast clean and pure is the way that we like to describe it. And it's high quality stuff, and we really love it. It's called Rusty Creek Coffee.
That's awesome. That's really cool. It's funny how I had another conversation on another episode about, turning things that are hobbies into a business. And some people, they're like, no, I don't want that to be a business. That's, I'm keeping that aside. Like for me, my wife and I, we do pottery, and we're like, that's a hobby. I'm not selling anything. Like if you love it and you want it, I'll make something for you. I don't care. I'll give it to you. That's fine. But other people, like, they find those things that it's just this interest that grows and grows and grows. And then it naturally, and, like you said, you were in this perfect position of, well, I have all the logistics, that platform's built. So now I can just launch off of that. So that's interesting stuff. Talk to me, obviously the story from construction to, making $2,800 in a year to we've now discovered 2 businesses with some real estate along the way. I'm sure not everything was a win along the way. And I always believe, like, success isn't always the best teacher. Like, failure teaches us a lot more than our successes. Talk to me about maybe some failures or some stumbles or, things along the way that taught you better than, oh, wow. Obviously the people that, the Lyles who brought you in and really helped you out, like, that was a big win and you learned a lot from that. But I'm sure there are other things along the way that weren't so good that maybe taught you something.
I'm a firm believer that lack and failure are 2 of the best teachers. And, I think my drive starting out, having a job since I was 8 years old goes to the lack. Like, I had ideas and I had things I wanted, and the lack drove me to be gainfully employed and to take risk and to start things. And failure by far is the best, is a fantastic teacher. It's what you do with it, right? You fail, and then you get up and you go, okay, well, why did that happen? What can I do can I improve and how can I prevent that from happening again? I think probably one of the bigger challenges I had in business was when COVID hit. My primary company is fundraising, which, a lot of your listeners probably don't know what that is. But in short, we work with schools and sports teams and we provide the products that they sell to make money. So we work with elementary schools, baseball teams, football teams, bands, choirs, that sort of thing. Trips, our middle school groups going on trips. And COVID hit. And that literally went from fall of 2019. We were 4 years into starting this business and resurrecting it from bankruptcy to our best season ever. We had a handful of employees and a building and things. We were thriving. And COVID hit and it literally shut off overnight. And it went from 100, where we couldn't take on another account. We had bought another business at that point. We were running at full capacity and life was good. And COVID hit and it shut off. And that's a whole nother story of just God providing in ways that we didn't see coming. I think my initial reaction was just to crawl into a bottle of whiskey and be depressed for a day or two. I didn't know what, it felt like my whole world had just crumbled. I devoted, if you've never started a business, I don't think you understand the work that it takes to start something and working more hours than anybody and sacrificing relationships and, all that kind of stuff. And I'd put all that in and I was finally seeing some payoff and it just stopped. And, I think sometimes through situations, circumstances, but also through people. And my same friend, Ryan, I remember he came over to the house and saw me in that state of depression. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sulking. I don't know a better term for it. I'm being a big fat baby and I'm sulking." And he goes, "Get up." He said, money doesn't stop flowing in a crisis like this. It just changes directions. So get up, look at what your assets are and figure out how can you get in the way of where money is and where it's going. And that was a moment. That was just one of those landmark moments like you were talking about where I got up and I went, okay. And we pivoted. We took a business that was 100% sales focused with schools and candy bars and pretzel rods and cookie dough and beef jerky. And we pivoted instantly and started buying overstock from Target, Costco, and Sam's Club and returns. And my sales team became a warehouse team and we started listing things on eBay, Amazon. We set up our own auction sites. We pivoted in any way we could to bring in revenue. And God taught me in that season, for a year where revenue from fundraising disappeared completely, that like my security, my value and my income isn't based on this business that he put me in charge of. It's in him, right? Like he's the provider. And I'm telling you, through just crazy circumstances and things that went on that shouldn't have happened, we never missed a payment on anything. We didn't lay anybody off long term. Short term we did, but we made it through as a company and are better now. And during that time, actually, my office manager and I took that respite of like, well, there's no sales. What do we do? And the answer was we could improve a specific part of our business. And that has become the most profitable thing now that we've ever done was that moment where we revamped a program completely and rebuilt it because we finally had the space and the bandwidth to do it. Is now the most profitable thing, employs the most people, and has been one of the best decisions we've made. And so God took this situation where I thought, well, we're done. We're bankrupt. We had at the time hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of candy bars out in children's hands and in families' hands. And schools were done. They shut down. Kids weren't coming. And I'm like, how do I recoup hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory? And that alone was enough to bankrupt me, not to mention all the other things stopped being revenue sources. And just so you know, we got all that money back. We put a product on our website. We built a page on our website for each school that had a significant amount of product out and let parents go there and pay for their product. And I thought, well, with the credit card. And I figured there was no way people were going to do that because they were scrambling to buy toilet paper at the time, right? Right. And we recouped 100% of that money. It all came in. And it was just, who would have thought, right? Like we just had an idea. How are you going to get cash from parents who aren't going to school? And and
Yeah.
it worked. People stepped up and did the right thing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so we've discovered now we've got fundraising, we've got
Mhm.
coffee, we've got overstock and auction sales. What else? What else are you doing?
So the other piece to the puzzle,
Yeah.
I should say another piece to the puzzle is when I bought the fundraising company, there was another company, a distribution company that warehoused a product that the fundraising company used. It was called J&K Distribution, and it was owned by
Okay.
two different people. And when I wanted to buy the fundraising company, I'd gone to the owner of the distribution company and said, if I buy the fundraising company, I need to know that I can buy your distribution company at the exact same time and bring them into one physical location.
Mm.
For me, looking at all the numbers and the way money moved and product moved, it was a critical thing that had to happen in order for the company to have enough strength to regrow and come back. And so it was owned by Karen Lyle, the distribution company was. And remember, the fundraising company was now owned by the son-in-law. So we purchased the fundraising company, and then Karen helped me with financing, and I bought the distribution company, and I brought them together into the same building at the same time, which I don't recommend starting two businesses at the same time to anyone. It's a lot of work, but we brought the two things together, and that business has also grown. It allows me to warehouse large amounts of product that my fundraising company can deliver instantly within hours to schools as needed without having to carry the overhead of having the inventory paid for in advance and tying up all that capital. And there's actually a lot of potential there moving forward for growth. And
Mm.
that is a big part of why we're able to do the coffee roasting as well, because of the distribution, shipping things daily, inventory systems,
Yeah.
forklifts, warehouse, all that kind of stuff lends itself to all those things as well.
Wow. Awesome. Okay, you said another piece of the puzzle. What else? What else is there?
Probably the last thing, occupation or business wise, my wife and
Yeah.
I do have a small, very small nonprofit. It's a 501c3 called
Okay.
littlebirdie.org. And it's just a place where if people feel led, they can donate to it. And we go around looking for ways that we can give back some of the undeserved blessings that God has given us. Like my wife, Carol, and I feel like we have been given so much more than we ever deserve. And so this nonprofit is a way that if we see somebody that has a need or is hurting or struggling, we can just take some time to either help financially or with a service project or with gifts, things like that. And again, it's a small part of what we do. At one point, I thought it was going to be what we did when I was working for the internet companies back in 2011, 12, 13. I thought this was going to be it. In fact, we did start doing exactly what GoFundMe does before GoFundMe. And we were doing really well until GoFundMe came and kicked our butts. And so it became it went from a large part of my day to a very small part of my day, but still
Yeah.
something that we're passionate about.
Very cool.
And then I
Very
think the last component is family. And I can't go
cool. Yeah.
without talking about, we have 6 kids. We have 3.5 grandkids. The half is one that's on the way here in April. And that is just a huge part of who I am and what's important. Family members get to work with me. I have the privilege of working with family members, my dad, my wife, my mom, my daughter, Madison, my daughter, Reese, my daughter-in-law, Julia, all work in some capacity. And that's a privilege, and that's super meaningful to me.
That's really cool. I love that side of it. Just and that again, the difference of grinding it out at a 9 to 5 and creating not just a business but something that your family is involved in and just thriving inside that. It's very, very cool. So that's really awesome. All right, real quick, what's next? What's the future for you? Are you staying pat with the I lost count how many things it is, or are there more things down the road?
So, it's a loaded question, of course. I think my heart is this, that daily I get up and find God's will. And I don't often know more than the step that I'm taking right now, what that is.
Sure.
If you'd asked me 2 years ago if I'd be starting a venture with coffee roasting and shipping coffee to different states and running somehow, I don't know how we're going to do it, but 68 farmers markets this summer
Oh my gosh.
I would have said no, like it's not something that's on my radar. But when it started to happen, I think I'm at the stage of life now that I start to realize when God's moving, and I just try to join him. So
Yeah.
I don't know. This stuff can vanish. Business, this stuff can vanish in a heartbeat. COVID showed me that. I mean, we went from millions to zero overnight. And God shows me that it's up to him, and it works in spite of me, not because of me. And yeah, that's the plan. And my business friends think I'm a little crazy, but that's how I operate.
And it seems to be working quite well.
So far, so good.
So far,
we got to take one quick second to just point out the fact that when we were starting and we were so overwhelmed with just trying to figure out how to get candy to all of these schools, your dad stepped up, and Ralph came in here and started working for me without any job description, without any hours that he was going to work, just came in and said, "What can I do to help?" That's my impression of Ralph. Stepped up and worked very hard, and I miss him like crazy, but he was awesome, and I was really privileged to get to work with him while I did.
I appreciate that. He always spoke fondly of working with you and everybody there, and he loved driving. He called it, he was on the chocolate highway. Yep. He would drive and just do deliveries, and he would send us pictures from the road, and he loved it. He really enjoyed his time there. And for an old retired dude who was just kicking around trying to make a couple extra bucks here and there and help somebody out, like it was definitely a joy in his life. So I'm gonna get weepy about it, but no, thank you for saying that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So we got to wrap things up here. We're running out of time quick here. If people want to get coffee, if they want to do fundraising, if they want to get in touch with you, I'll give you some time here and just share the socials, the emails, whatever it is, the best way that people can get a hold of you.
Awesome. Appreciate that. So probably the most connectable thing that I do is the coffee, rustycreekcoffee.com. You can go directly to the website and order there. We're on Facebook and Instagram. My daughter Madison posts pictures of drinks being made almost daily, so you can find us there. If you're looking for fundraising, if you're involved in schools, sports, that sort of thing, Diamond Fundraising is the name of the company. And you can get a hold of us through the website there as well. And there's email addresses on both websites. If you feel like reaching out to me, I'd be happy to talk with you.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna wrap things up. Again, if you need to get a hold of me, or you wanna talk podcasting, or if you know other business owners that would love to be on the show, have a story to share, everybody does. Would love to chat with them and see if they would be a good fit to be on the show. You can get a hold of me at jeremiah@crookedpathmedia.com. Again, all my contact info is in the show notes as well. Or if you heard something today that inspired you and you think somebody else needs to hear it, please share the show with folks. That's a great way to thank Kevin for his time today, sharing his story with us and being on the show. So with that, Kevin, thanks so much for being on today, man.
Thanks for having me, Jeremiah.
Absolutely. And once again, I'm Jeremiah Isley, and this is In The Ellipsis.